When Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep came out, I had to wait an agonizing 3.5 months to play it because I was a broke, PSP-less baby. So on September 7th, 2010, while all the grown-ups flaunted their financial freedom while the more persistent and charismatic children than I pestered their parents, I sat waiting patiently until Christmas. In retrospect, I have an October birthday, so I'm not sure why I didn't get it then. Point stands, Birth by Sleep is a game I heavily associate with the end of the year because that's when I first played it at age 14. I spent a lot of nights cozied up in bed with my Christmas candy and my PSP, a machine that would go on to complete the campaigns of BBS, play a few minutes of Dissidia and Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, and then graduate to Dusty Thing in Drawer. All this to say, whenever December and January roll around, there's a good shot I fall back into a nostalgic Birth by Sleep mood. It and Chain of Memories are the two KH games I mentally associate with Christmas time because I also got calm on Christmas Eve of 2004. That little guy had no idea he would go on to become a Twitch emote. When I was making my last video, which was a journey across the series to find the best treasure chests in each world, I inevitably had to play a bit of Birth by Sleep for footage purposes. And as I did that, I thought, wow, if people find this treasure chest thing super niche, just wait till I rank all the D-links. Yeah, so I've recently been really fixated on this kind of obscure feature that only appeared in one side game in the series, or bridge game, whatever you want to call it. Did a video about that whole conversation as well. Understand that me making this video is not me resorting to anything, because if that were the case, you'd think I would have done something on summons before landing here. No, I'm doing this because it's what I feel like doing. I don't expect the D-Link video to be a real blockbuster, but I have been genuinely fascinated by these things as of late. And the more I've played around with them and essentially studied them for this video, the more new stuff I learn, so maybe you'll learn some stuff too. Well, first off, I think D-Links, or Dimension Links if you're feeling fancy, can ultimately be described with one word, and that's compromise. These are Walmart brand summons, or Wish.com, or Temu, or whatever is the trendy cheap thing now. It's the vibe of a summon, but it costs the devs way less to implement. Whether it was an issue of time, or hardware limitations, or just a lack of good ideas, I don't know, but these are clearly here to serve the same role that summons do, just without an actual, well, summon. So while it was initially disappointing to realize that we wouldn't be calling on Morph from Treasure Planet or Donald's buddies from the Three Caballeros to do our violent bidding for us, I do think D-Links are a bit slept on. Or at the very least, I think they're often pretty creative and charming. We can't book the celebrities themselves, but we can have their managers send some notes, and TVA can try emulating them by way of new commands and special abilities that are only active when the D-Link is. Plus, this gives us a way to call on the strength of characters who wouldn't really make sense as summons. Aqua can't exactly summon Terra since the campaigns run concurrently. I would be so pissed if I were Terra, almost done with the goddamn Ericus fight, and then Aqua yanks me through a wormhole and I have to help her grind mobs in Disney Town. And I should say, you really never have to use D-Links. I mean, you never have to use summons in the other games either, but D-Links are arguably less useful, especially on a casual, lower difficulty playthrough of Birth by Sleep. There are use cases for a good handful, but if you're someone just trying to see the credits to the game, this entire feature can go untouched and ultimately forgotten, and I won't even pretend your experience is way worse off because of it. When I first played through, I probably used them once or twice out of curiosity, and then never again because I found the whole mechanic a bit confusing. But these things are here, and they can be quite useful, especially on a challenge or completionist run. I guess this should be the part where I tell you that this isn't just a ranking of the D-Links, but also a collection of my thoughts and occasional grievances about the entire mechanic. Makes for a worse title, but just roll with me here. Or not, and skip to this timestamp if you want to know what number last is, but just know you're gonna miss some fun stuff. So for those sticking with me, hi, you look great today, let's go over some basics in case you're just as confused and or apathetic about this mechanic as I once was. When you use a D-Link, your entire command deck gets replaced with a deck themed to the character you're linking with. You're basically just playing dress up until your blue gauge runs out. Which, come to think of it, it would have been really cool if TVA's clothing changed a bit to reflect the link, but again, time, budget, etc. Now, the reason a lot of folks probably never use D-Links a ton, myself included, is because when you first use one, it's kinda useless. I mean, not useless, but not anywhere near its fullest potential. But in some cases, it's even a downgrade if you're replacing your own personalized deck with one that lacks your usual tools. In a good few cases, these decks lack any command that allows you to heal, making them even more dangerous to use in a pinch. Of course, like using a drive form in KH2, using a D-Link gives you a full heal, which can be used strategically. So if nothing else, you can walk into every boss battle with a free heal locked and loaded, just link to any character, get the HP handout, and unlink back to your usual deck. Also, like drive forms, you can pretty easily cheese refilling your D-Link gauge without having to use an item. In fact, it's even easier than using any KH2 exploits. Here, you just need to go to a save point, access the world map, head back into the world, and your gauge is completely refilled. Knowing and taking advantage of this makes them a lot more practical to use. Now, sometimes you're stuck in a battle and can't reach a save point, or maybe you can, but you're just lazy. That's where the balloon letter item comes in, something a lot of people probably pick up and never use once because they don't use D-Link, so why would they care about replenishing the gauge? Especially not if you have to waste a precious command deck slot on them. But on the flip side, if you find a D-Link or two you really like, you can basically build your playthrough around just using those links by bringing a few balloon letters along with you. Did you know it's literally a letter attached to a balloon? Because I sure fucking didn't, never saw this before in my life. Are we sending SOS letters to these characters, asking them to give us more blue juice? I should note though that anytime you're in a battle with a party member or doing any kind of escort mission, you can't D-Link, so you can't entirely rely on them. I think it's because your character feels awkward and guilty about calling on the strength of someone else while you already have someone physically there fighting with you. But yeah, don't go into a battle with Trinity armor equipped with balloon letters or the intention to D-Link because you'll get no use out of either. You should also know that if you've only got a few or even just one D-Link that you actually care about, you can turn off the ones that you don't use in the D-Link menu. This will save you some time scrolling through options you never use so you can get right to the one you want. I've also seen folks bemoan how they much prefer a D-Link's finisher when the link is at level 0 or 1, and that it's a shame that it gets replaced by a less efficient finisher at level 2. That too can be toggled, so if you don't like the maxed out finisher, just switch it back to the original one. You'll still keep all the other benefits of the fully leveled D-Link, so don't worry about losing those. Speaking of those benefits, let's circle back around to D-Link's perceived uselessness. I'll say generally, I wouldn't consider any D-Link bad, it's only in comparison to other D-Links that one might appear less useful in any given situation. But all of them are kinda trash at the beginning because all you're getting is that free heal and a new batch of commands. Sometimes, especially early game, these new commands can be an upgrade, but they're still things you can eventually get on your own. It's not until collecting both of a D-Link's emblems that its true potential is unlocked. I've seen some confusion and misinformation regarding how to get these emblems, and it's actually really simple. For every unversed you kill while using a D-Link, there's a chance they'll drop one of these yellow-orange wayfinders. You can also get them from Maleficent's goons if you prefer harvesting them instead. According to the KH Wiki, different characters have different percentage chances of dropping an emblem. The D-Links based on the playable characters have a 10% chance to drop the first emblem and 7% for the second. The same goes for the princesses and Maleficent. Mickey, Zack, and Stitch have a 12% chance for the first and 8% for the second. Donald, Goofy, and Peter Pan have a whopping 20% chance for the first emblem and 15% for the second. I don't really know why this is, but as you can see, there's a trend of the early game D-Links having a lower drop chance with the later game ones having a higher chance. You'd kind of think it would be the opposite, but maybe they figured you'd have more time to level up the early game ones, so they gave them a lower chance to account for that. For the record, the wiki doesn't have percentages for Pete's drops, I'm assuming because the stats never showed up in an Ultimania since the Pete D-Link wasn't in the initial Japanese release. If I had to guess, he would have the same stats as the middle batch of characters since he's effectively unlocked at Disney Town, more on that later. Anyway, great, you killed something and it dropped one of them wayfinders. Pick it up, you get some D-Link juice back, we'll call it D-Juice for short, and for fun, and you'll also level up the D-Link. By the way, enemies can still keep dropping wayfinders at a further reduced chance even after you've obtained both emblems. Picking them up at this point doesn't unlock anything new, but it'll give you more D-Juice, so no harm in going after them. Leveling a D-Link up adds some more commands to the deck, but most importantly, it unlocks one of the Link's special abilities. These are by far the most useful parts of a D-Link, way more so than any of the commands it gives you. And when ranking the links, I'm going to place a lot of emphasis on these abilities because they're the major draw to using one D-Link over another. But wait, before we get to ranking Ds, I need to present my grievances. I understand and appreciate that you want to get to the quote-unquote point of the video, but I need to grieve. Let me just show you the breakdown of which characters get which D-Links. All of the playable characters get D-Links of each other, but not one of themselves. So Terra gets Aqua and Ven gets Terra and Aqua gets Terra and Ven. All three get Cinderella, Peter Pan, Stitch, Zack, and Pete. Terra gets Maleficent, Aqua and Ven get Mickey, Donald, Goofy, and Snow White. Do you see a problem here? Now, I'm no mathematician, but it would appear our favorite earthy himbo was given the middle part of the Keyblade, also known as the shaft. Why does he only get 8 while his friends get 11? Don't tell me it's because he's hanging out with the villains more often, because clearly D-Links can be villains, case in point, Maleficent. I guess you could say it's more reflective of Terra's more stoic personality, of his tendency to try and solve problems on his own, but at that point, I feel like having D-Links for him at all kind of goes against that. So, I don't know, let me know if you can think of a reason for this, either characterization or gameplay-wise. But upon witnessing this lopsided injustice, I decided that it simply would not do. If you're not going to give my boy his equal share of D-Links, I'll make my own. Introducing Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep Final Mix Terra Justice Edition. Don't tell me the title is too long, you've seen what these fuckers are capable of. It's the same game you know and have 4th to 6th in your series rankings, but now with equality. To make up for Terra not getting the Snow White D-Link, even though he literally interacts with her more than Aqua does, he's doubling up on Neverland D-Links. That's right, Terra is being given the toll-free phone number of the Jolly Roger's own Captain Hook. I figure he'd get this right after the initial mob fight when arriving in Neverland. And sure, it turns out that Hook is duping Terra, but the guy can still call on the person who mind-controlled him into stealing a sleeping girl's heart, so again, villainy is not a disqualifier for linking one's Ds. So I've come up with brand new command decks and abilities for these invented D-Links. The abilities aren't as good because a lot of the better ones were already taken by real D-Links, but I tried. I should also mention I asked my friend PJ, aka Cabletown Art, to help us fully and truly realize these imaginary D-Links, and he was so kind as to whip up these beautiful and incredibly faithful D-Link gauges. If you told me this was hidden in the game's code this entire time, I'd believe you. Not only that, he even made 2 emblems for each character, and 2 separate portraits just like in the game, so we've really got the full experience here. A huge thanks to PJ for his work on these. Please go give him a follow on his social medias in the description. He's got lots of fun and creative Kingdom Hearts art that he's been making for years. Right, so Captain Hook. We've got his Tinkerbell Lantern Prison for his first emblem, and one of his throwable present bombs for his second. For abilities, I gave him Thunder Screen, which reduces damage from Thunder-type attacks, and would stack with any other Thunder Screens you already have, even past the max amount on your abilities list. This might seem like a random pick, but it's a reference to Hook's ability to neutralize Thunder attacks in both KH1 and Chain of Memories. Ability 2 is HP Prize Mega Plus, which drastically increases the amount of HP orbs dropped by enemies, which will be helpful since Hook's deck comes with no cure commands. For the commands, I only worked out the finalized decks at level 2, I didn't think it really mattered what the progression looked like for our purposes here. I gave Hook Fira as a reference to the cannon fire he's often commanding, and Fire Dash to reference him running around with his pants on fire when hit with a fire spell in KH1. He's also got Stop, a reference to TikTok the Crocodile, as well as just a general reference to Big Ben, which houses Neverland's keyhole. I gave him Binding Strike, a reference to his capturing Tinkerbell and tying up the Lost Boys and the Darlings. He also has Wind Cutter, which I think is just visually similar to his big Get Off Me attack in KH1. Lastly, as a reference to learning Ars Arcanum after his boss fight in KH1, the Hook deck comes stocked with Ars Solum. I know Arcanum is in the game, but it's a Ven exclusive, and this is a Terra exclusive D-Link. Fully leveled D-Links also always come with either 7 or 8 commands. Hook only has 6, but Ars Solum actually costs 2 slots in a deck. The real D-Links actually never grant any double slot commands, which I guess is fair, they're often pretty powerful, but you can only use them for as long as the link is active, so I didn't hold back when assigning commands to my fake links. Alright, that's one injustice undone. Next we have yet another villain D-Link for Terra, a bit more fearsome one in Master Xehanort. I really think this is a layup. Terra spends most of the game seeking guidance from and looking up to Xehanort, so a D-Link isn't too far out of an idea. Again, he gets one from Maleficent, who he had 2 interactions with, one incredibly negative. Ideally, I'd like this D-Link to come when Terra rescues Xehanort from Breg and Radiant Garden, since it's right around here when Ven and Aqua get the Mickey D-Link, which Terra lacks. But I did give Xehanort some high-level commands that might be a bit too OP for the mid-game, so this could also be moved to when Xehanort summons Terra to the Keyblade Graveyard to warn him about Ven confronting Ericus. Xehanort's first emblem is the Gazing Eye, which grants Dark Screen. Naturally, Xehanort isn't too bothered by Dark-type attacks. Emblem 2 is Key, some say Kai, but the meaning is the same. This also changes Xehanort's portrait to the No Heart armor, which, I guess spoilers if you level this up before fighting it in the Mirage Arena, but, hey, look over there! I went a little wacky for Xehanort's second ability, but I came up with Doom. This lets you insta-kill one enemy per linking session, barring a few exceptions, like no bosses or any of the special Portal Unversed. You'd cast Doom by using the D-pad to access an exclusive additional menu on the command deck. When set to this, your next basic Keyblade attack would cast Doom on the target, giving it a Marluxia-style countdown from 3 to 0, after which it kicks the bucket. Might not be too useful in a typical playthrough beyond novelty, but I could see it having actual utility in a level 1 run. As for commands, obviously I needed to give Xehanort some darkness-related ones, so he gets Dark Haze and Dark Faraga. He gets Stopka, since we've seen him use it in KH3, plus it's a bit of a nod to his younger self's time-traveling antics. I pulled from some moves we see him use in the KH2 secret ending, and eventually the BBS not secret ending, including Blizzaga and Geo Impact. The Ven D-Link has Freeze Raid, and I always wondered if that was a reference to Xehanort turning him into a Vencicle during that battle, but I gave Xehanort Blizzaga to match it. Geo Impact is one of the few outright earthy moves a playable character can use, and Xehanort shows that he's able to raise massive pieces of earth from the ground. Lastly, I gave him Brutal Blast, because Xehanort is, frankly, a fucking brutal guy. That leaves us with one more new D-Link for Terra, and I think this is another layup, a D-Link based on Master Ericus. This would be the only D-Link that you get after killing the character you'd be linking with. I mean, Ericus falls into Terra and clearly is squatting there until the end of KH3, so despite being supposedly dead, I think it'd be easy for Terra to link with him. Don't think too hard about where those balloon letters are going. Ericus' first emblem is this symbol, which the Birth by Sleep Ultimania calls Terra's Mark, even though it's used by tons of people who are not Terra and very much predate him. But Ericus is one of those people, and this mark is also the area transition symbol for Land of Departure, so it works. His first ability is maybe too OP for BBS, I'm not sure, but it's Attack Bracer, which prevents enemies from interrupting your commands. I kinda pulled that from Chain of Memories, the Jafar enemy card to be specific. Emblem 2 is from Ericus' Shield spell, also a bit referential to how Aqua's D-Link uses her Barrier Honeycombs as her first emblem. Of course, like with Xehanort, the Ericus portrait gains his suit of armor from the Mirage Arena battle at level 2. I really like this call by PJ since the playable characters all get their armor when maxed out as well. At level 2, the Ericus D-Link gets something I kinda made up but also pulled from COM, Shotlock Kinesis, which allows you to charge up shotlocks while moving. Again, might be too strong, might not even be doable or practical, but this is all made up for fun, so whatever. The Ericus commands are a bit more nebulous. I tried to give him generally light-themed stuff. I tend to think of the Mind commands as light-based, even though that's not really their affinity in-game, but I gave Ericus Mind Shield. Transcendence is his 2-slot command, which you might argue is more darkness-themed since it makes an anti-gravity field, but it sure does look like a big light show. He'll also get a special exclusive command called Light Surge, which is just a rename and yellow-white recolor of Barrier Surge. Maybe breaking the rules, but Cinderella got her own renamed stuff, so why not? Terra also technically can't use Barrier Surge, but he can use Light Surge, because I said so. I also gave him Xantetskin because Ericus has that samurai vibe, and I think this move fits that energy. Also, yeah, apparently it's Xantetskin, not Xantetsuken. Then he's got Sacrifice, which expends a ton of HP to do a big attack. Terra sorta radiates with light when he does it, so I think it works. Sonic Blade was an obvious one because Ericus loves screaming and zipping around during his boss fight. Finally, I gave him Collision Magnet. For no real reason, I just think it's cool, it isn't used in any other D-Links, and it kinda just makes sense for Ericus. So there, we did it. We fixed inequality, and now we can start ranking the real D-Links. 18 minutes into the video about ranking the D-Links. Although, I'm looking at our new D-Link distribution, and while it's definitely an improvement, look how homogeneous Vens and Aquas are. This makes it look like they have practically the same campaign. It's literally the same exact list besides having each other's D-Link, and that's no fun. So I gave PJ some more money, because he deserves it, and these characters deserve different D-Links, and you deserve to see them. But since I went out of my way to bump up Terra's count, I'm not just adding more to Ven and Aqua. We're keeping things at 11 per character, which means I get to kill people. Starting with Ven, I think it's kinda bonkers that he gets a Cinderella D-Link because he ultimately spends the least amount of time with her compared to Terra, who escorts her to the ball, and Aqua, who helps her out with the glass slipper. Sure, they meet, and Cindy refrains from chucking Mouse Ven into the fireplace, but it's hardly a bond. No, Ven spends most of his Castle of Dreams trip hanging out with... It pained me, but it just makes sense. Replacing Cinderella, Ven gets a D-Link with Jacques. For emblem number 1, we have the Corn Kernel from the mice breakfast scene in the movie. Getting Jacques to level 1 also provides you with an additional Lucky Strike ability, which increases the drop rate of items. I figured it makes sense considering Jacques is always running around and gathering stuff, like for the dress in Ven's visit. Level 2's emblem is the Pearl, the last material needed to complete the aforementioned dress. This changes Jacques' portrait into his horse form, which I think is hilarious and a very inspired choice by PJ. Level 2 also grants an ability I made up, Mini Boost, which gives you a 1.5 damage multiplier on enemies who have been shrunk. So as you can probably guess, I gave Jacques 2 mini commands for his deck, because, you know, he's small. I also gave him Quick Blitz and Sliding Dash because this is a fairly early D-Link, but they also reflect his quick and nimble nature. Further realizing that item scavenging theme, I also gave him Treasure Raid, which can cause enemies to drop prizes, also fittingly event exclusive command. Jacques also comes with a Confuse command because I have no idea what the fuck he's saying. And given that Jacques serves as general moral support for Cinderella, I figured he should have some curative spells, so he gets Akira and an Asuna. I literally never use Asuna, it's kind of useless, but I don't mind giving Jacques a useless command. Next up, I'm no Zack hater, but I don't think all 3 characters really need a Zack D-Link. And of the 3, I think it's least justified for Ven. They do hang out and have a laugh together, but the other 2 get to have a duel with him. Ven spends more of his Olympus trip with Hercules, and while it's not the most exciting pick, I do think it makes more sense. I considered making Lee the replacement here, and I even made the deck for it, but there's already 3 D-Links that are heavy on the fire stuff, plus Ven gets a Keyblade from their interaction, so that's kinda covered already. So, naturally, Herc starts off with his young appearance for his first portrait and becomes Adult Herc at level 2. I specifically asked for one of his emblems to be a Cup of Herculade, and PJ thankfully obliged. The other emblem is his medallion from when he was a baby. The Herc abilities are kinda boring, feel free to pitch some alternatives, but I landed on Attack Haste, which would make your attack commands reload faster, and Thunder Boost, which increases the damage dealt by thunder-based commands. Of course, Hercules comes equipped with Thundaga and Thunder Surge to reflect his dad being the god of thunder. I gave him Stun Edge and Sonic Blade as references to his KH1 fight. He also loves running around the arena and has those shockwave moves, so I thought they fit well enough. The rest are just some general strong physical moves, those being Blitz and Ars Arcanum. The Hercules Cup does unlock right after learning the latter in KH1, and as I mentioned, it's a Ven exclusive move in BBS. Okay, with that, Ven is covered, meaning we move on to Aqua. So, there is absolutely no reason both Ven and Aqua should get D-Links for Donald and Goofy. I let Ven keep them as a little nod to Ven's upcoming connection with Sora, and thus Sora's upcoming connection to Donald and Goofy, but Aqua hardly even knows the guys, so they're both getting cut. For our first replacement, we're turning to Enchanted Dominion, which was pretty stingy about handing out D-Links in the actual game. With the newly added Herc D-Link, every temporary party member in the game is linkable, save for this guy, Prince Philip. So might as well get him in on this, he and Aqua do cooperate for like half of her Enchanted Dominion visit. Of course, Philip is classically a blandman, so this was a little tricky, but I tried my best. PJ made some great emblems for Philip, the first being his hat, occupied by this owl fella. This would unlock a fire screen ability, because, you know, he fights the dragon shoots fire. I don't know, it's Philip. Emblem 2 is one of his boots, being commandeered by this rabbit. I watched Sleeping Beauty one time about 5 years ago, and I remember none of this, but I trust PJ. It's better than just using a sword and shield for his emblems, because, again, it's Philip. Level 2 grants Damage Siphon, which restores focus when you take damage, because that's kinda just what I had left over for ability ideas. Naturally, Philip also starts off in his plain clothes, but graduates to his ass-kicking suit at level 2. For commands, I gave Philip some skillful weapon techniques like Strike Raid and Aerial Slam. Given his alliance with the good fairies, I thought it fair to also spare him a Cure command. Honestly, the fairies themselves could have made for a good D-Link too, probably for Ven if I had to pick. Philip is also famous for using his world-renowned Philip Shield, so I gave him Mind Shield and Barrier Surge. And then, something really stupid that I'm only a little proud of, 2 Aurora commands. Aurora. I just realized I never came up with finishers for any of these, but I also would have no way to illustrate them. Well, there technically is a way, but it probably involves PJ walking away with my savings and one of my kidneys. Our last fake D-Link takes us to Radiant Garden, where Aqua acquires the Mickey D-Link, but will also now get a D-Link with Kairi. I know it's kinda awkward to get 2 right in a row, but that's what the real game does with Donald and Goofy, so no big deal. Her first emblem is her bouquet of Lyre Flowers. Let it be known that she is already holding these flowers before Aqua saves her from the Unversed, and then after the battle, Kairi says, "Oh, I picked these flowers for you." Bullshit, Lyre. You're not slick. These were obviously for your grandma and you pivoted on the spot. And somehow this girl is a princess of heart. Pinocchio deserves a written apology. Apparently, lying is super cool and chic if you're a Radiant Garden coastal elite. Anyway, picking up the first emblem grants Magic Haste, making your magic commands reload faster. Level 2's emblem is one of her Thalassa shells that Kairi would go on to use as part of her lucky charm. This changes her portrait to Cage 2 era Kairi and unlocks her second ability, which I pseudo-made up, Lock On Teleport. This is reaching pretty far ahead to her playable appearance and Remind, but this would cause any basic Keyblade attacks to teleport Aqua to whatever she's targeting, similar to how Kairi handles in the DLC. As you might expect, Kairi's commands reflect her future status as a Princess of Heart and Pure Light, with some added tools of destruction. Because she can be violent, she bonks Sora on the head, you know. Kairi comes equipped with Cura and Curaga, as well as some Aqua-exclusive commands just to make the Link feel more special, including Seeker Mine, Magic Hour, and Wishing Edge. I threw in a sliding dash for filler, and she also gets Aroga as sort of a cheeky reference to her future bond with Sora, who's associated with the sky on account of his name and all. Okay, now we're all caught up on fake D-Link crafting. Take a look at our new pool of links. Isn't that much better? Equal number, diversified picks, all in a day's work. Well, it took me a few days to get this all figured out, but that sounds less impressive, all in a few days' work. You know, like, who gives a shit? If you could believe it, this video really wasn't supposed to be about this when I first settled on the idea of ranking the D-Links, but it took me here, and when else would I get out these grievances? I even started making D-Link command decks for other characters, like I made a Simba one just for fun. It's a neat little exercise, and call me Winnie the Pooh, I love a neat little exercise. Alright, now we can get to our feature presentation. I'll be ranking all of the actual D-Links based on their utility, not necessarily their aesthetic or creative merits. So I'm trying to factor in how useful they are in a variety of different playthroughs, when they're acquired, if they mesh well with the characters who can use them, their abilities, their finishers, their commands they come with, etc. With that, let's get to our bottom entry.
Well, it's about time!
Number 14? Wait a minute, aren't there only 13?
Hey guys, feeling a little left out here.
This little bastard. Listen, it's conceptually cool that you basically canonically D-Link at least once during the story, and with the person you're fighting against no less, but in practice, I'm not the biggest fan. I don't appreciate a non-consensual D-Link, especially when the first time through, and even some other times through, I was not entirely clear on what the fuck I needed to do here. It wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't at the very end of the fight after you deplete Vanitas' HP fair and square, but, you know, it is, so... I'm just never a fan of moments like this in video games where you put in the work and then the game pulls out a trump card, in many ways a beginner's trap, and you kinda have to just roll with it. Unless you're over-leveled or playing on an easier difficulty, there's good odds you're gonna mess this up and have to repeat the fight again. I mean, at least the attacks are cool, but I'm usually too stressed out about finishing the fight to really appreciate them in the moment. As if I needed any other reason to banish this Link to the bottom spot, Vanitas also grants no additional abilities. What a cheapskate.
Make me.
As I said earlier, I don't really think any of the D-Links are bad, well, besides Vanitas. They all have the potential to get the job done, but some just don't really have a great reason to be picked over any others. So at number 13, I'm going with Snow White. Which is a shame because it's probably the most charming D-Link, how each command is named after one of the 7 dwarves, and they were pretty creative with the theming on each one. Doc heals, Sneezy is arrow, Sleepy is, who would have guessed, sleep. Then they get even more creative, Happy throws confetti, which I always thought was just a useless gag command, but it actually increases the chance of your next attack being a critical hit. Grumpy is Treasure Raid, which works twofold. It's obviously pretty aggressive, maybe even grumpy, to throw your weapon at someone, but it also makes items drop, and the dwarves spend all day in the mines hunting for treasure. Bashful took me a sec to get because it's the warp command which makes enemies disappear, but then I was like, oh, Bashful is shy, and it's like the enemies are shy, so they're hiding. I mean, they're dead, but it's cute. The only miss in my opinion is Dopey, which is a mini command. I mean, there's a confuse command right there. Granted, I prefer mini, it's way more useful, but I don't think the synergy is quite there. I guess the dwarves are all short, so maybe that's why mini is in here, but you could have thrown that on any of the dwarves, so I don't know. Some of my patrons theorized it's because Dopey is the youngest of the dwarves, which is better than anything else I could come up with. As for the Link's utility, again, I don't think it's bad, I just don't often find many opportunities to use it. It comes with a Cure command by way of Doc, which is nice, but all of the TVA D-Links are obtained earlier, and they all come with Cure or Cura commands when maxed out. Aqua even has Cura at level 0 without putting in any work. I suppose if you really wanted to farm items, you could spam the Grumpy command, but it's only even slightly worthwhile as Aqua. Ven can get Treasure Raid, which is just Grumpy but with higher drop rates. Even when the command is unleveled, Treasure Raid has a 40% prize box drop rate when it connects, while Grumpy is set to 30%. Keep in mind, you can't level up the commands in a D-Link deck, so that 30% is fixed, whereas Treasure Raid can be leveled up to level 4, where it has a 70% chance drop rate. Another pitfall of the Link is that both of its abilities are pretty insular and are only concerned with boosting the efficacy of the D-Link itself. Which is great if you really like it, but if you don't, it's not giving you anything of value. The first one is Gauge Boost, which increases how fast your attacks fill up the command gauge and thus get you to the finisher. The second ability is Quick Load, which reduces the reload time for friendship commands by 33%. Every dwarf command in the deck is classified as a friendship command, so they all reload faster. So again, there's no real benefit to these things outside of the D-Link, which is a finite experience. But for what it's worth, the finishers for Snow White are pretty solid, especially the level 2 one, Sweet 7. You get to throw the Chaos Emeralds at your enemies, and it gives you a big chunk of iframes while you do it. So it's not the worst at cleaning out mobs, especially since Gauge Boost is here to speed up the rate the command gauge fills up. I also had no idea about this prior to starting this project, but each D-Link also has a special condition for making the command gauge fill up faster, and for Snow White's, this is your HP being at 25% or lower. When this is the case, the gauge just fills steadily, and you can basically chain finishers together one after another. It's a bit tricky to fully abuse, especially on higher difficulties, since you need to both stay alive and avoid any HP orbs, but it seems like they at least knew that this Link is geared toward activating the finisher a ton. And thankfully, the finisher is pretty efficient. There are definitely more efficient ways to kill a bunch of shit, but this isn't a terrible option, especially early game. Also, Terra doesn't get Snow White as a D-Link, which, boo. At least they actually have a conversation. Snow White and Aqua never even share words with each other.
How can this be?
So honestly, the bottom 3 spots I think are fairly interchangeable and probably just depend on your playstyle. Fittingly, they're all early game D-Links. At number 12, I'm slotting in the Mistress of All Evil, Maleficent. Unfortunately, her D-Link is just about as washed up as the character is after KH1. This one is Terra exclusive, and it just really doesn't serve him all that well. Terra is the least magically adept of the trio, and all but one of Maleficent's commands are magic-based. This deck would have worked much better with someone like Aqua, but Terra is the character who gets the least mileage out of a deck composition like this one. On top of that, the deck is loaded with a bunch of status commands, which are really hit or miss in terms of utility, especially on bosses. Blackout, which causes the blind effect, is usable on Captain Hook, and that's it. And Terra never fights him. Sleep is a bit more useful, as it works on Braig, the Magic Mirror for some reason, Peter Pan, and the early Masked Vanitas fights. And also Captain Hook, but again, not fought by Terra. I'll admit I was sleeping on Ignite a bit. That one at least works on 12 different bosses, and it can even come in handy for mobs when you're not hitting particularly hard on a low level or challenge run. But still, so much of the deck is status stuff, and it's really just not worth using any of them unless you've memorized who's susceptible to what, or you have a spreadsheet telling you that. Of course, throughout this process, I made a spreadsheet that does tell you that, link in the description. To be honest, the only reason Maleficent is above Snow White is because the 2 D-Link abilities are a bit more useful and less self-concerned. The first is Focus Saver, which saves you 50% of the focus you use when doing a shot lock. This isn't amazing by any means, but if you're really into using shot locks, I guess this can be handy. Ability 2 is Drain, which heals you a bit when dealing regular Keyblade attacks. This is at least somewhat helpful since there's no Cure in the deck, which, by the way, Terra would have access to already thanks to the Ven and Aqua links. But it's not like you're ever going to pop the Maleficent D-Link so you can specifically use Drain, because any D-Link gives you a free heal. So Drain is just there to keep you alive while you're unable to heal again until you either revert or the link runs out. And it only heals a quarter of the damage you dealt with your attack, so it's not like a combo or two gets your health all the way back up. Once again though, Maleficent's finishers aren't too bad, though I might prefer the lower level one over the maxed out one. Dragonfire is visually really cool and it can do decent damage, but it locks you into place and you're limited to this awkward downward angle. It's easy for enemies to avoid you or escape the flames, and you're kinda just floating there until it's over. The first finisher, Thunder Chaser, gives you a bit more freedom with how the attack is aimed, even if it's not quite as damaging. So, as a reminder, if you don't like how the maxed out finisher feels, you can always toggle it to the other finisher, which I tend to do with Maleficent.
That is enough!
Finishing off the links obtained in that first circuit of Princess Worlds at number 11 is Cinderella, who, again, I entertained putting either 13th or 12th, and ultimately I think this is neck and neck with Maleficent's. A main advantage Cinderella has is her accessibility for all 3 characters, and given that it's another magic-heavy deck, at least Aqua and to an extent Ven can get some more mileage out of it. Like Snow White, her commands are all uniquely named and themed to her, which is cool, although her final deck is just 4 commands 2 times each. Unfortunately, this means 25% of her deck is the Magic Circle command, which has a crazy startup time for no reason and isn't even all that practical to use in any kind of battle. On the plus side, Wish Shot isn't too bad for a magic projectile, and the surge moves are always good, so you can't be mad at 2 barrier surge commands renamed to Enchanted Step for the Cindy D-Link. She also has 2 commands called Magic Mending, which are really just renamed Curas. Granted, Aqua's Link also comes with a baked-in Cura and comes earlier, but I suppose Aqua herself can't make use of that, so this is a good replacement for her. I think the whole theme of Cinderella's Link is general curative stuff because one of her abilities is Regen, unlocked at level 2. This restores 1% of your HP every second, but we're talking real Mississippi seconds here because god does it feel way slower than that. On one hand, Regen is better than Drain because you're getting HP back for just existing, but on the other, you're probably going to be hitting things more often than not and thus getting more back from Drain. But Drain is also not an option that Aqua or Ven have, so I think it balances out. Her other ability is an absolute joke though, and that joke is called Auto Remedy. This might as well be an empty slot because I can't think of a single time where my gameplay was significantly impaired by a status effect. And it's not like this ability protects you from status effects entirely, it just reduces the amount of time they last to 1/3 of how long they usually do. I mean, how truly stingy, it should just nullify any status inflictions for the duration of the D-Link. On top of that, the special condition to get the command gauge to fill up with this D-Link is to be inflicted with the status command, so there's basically no way to control that and it may as well have no special condition at all. Cindy's finishers are also a bit underwhelming, and her first one is probably the worst of the ones we've covered so far. Some finishers don't require much input from you, but some have you play a micro game, and it's not that this one is hard, but you'd probably rather be using a finisher that doesn't have a quote-unquote lose condition. But even if you do nail every single prompt here, Dream Sparkle glues your feet to the ground, so you're only going to be shooting directly in front of you, and it's amazing how often it doesn't connect with enemies if they're just ever so slightly out of the way. It does fine damage whenever it connects, but if you happen to kill whatever's immediately in front of you, the finisher just keeps going and you're stuck shooting at nothing until it's over. The second finisher, Miracle Dance, is definitely better, but I wouldn't say it's the best one we've seen so far either. It's basically Aqua's Spellweaver finisher, except you can't move. So ultimately, if you find that you really need some extra healing, especially early on, Cinderella isn't an awful pick, but one that's unfortunately hampered by a waste of an ability, a kind of middling one, and 2 uninspiring finishers.
It's just no use.
At the top 10, I do think we enter a sort of second tier of D-Links, as I consider the bottom 3 kinda meh, whereas this next chunk up until around the top 5 are all pretty serviceable, even if they don't immediately stand out for one particular reason, like the top 5 might. At number 10, I'm going with Donald, which is not bad by any stretch, I just don't think it has a ton of standout qualities. The main factor holding it back is how late into the game you get it. It's practically right before the final world, so it doesn't get much room to be useful during the campaign. And it's not like it's particularly better at handling any late or post-game stuff when compared to your other options. Donald's kit revolves around fire spells, but a bunch of other magic attacks as well, making it a good offensive pick, especially for Aqua. In addition, one of his abilities is Magic Boost, which gives a 1.5 damage multiplier to any magic attacks. Ability 2 is Shell, which halves damage taken from any elemental attacks. Certainly not a bad thing, but there will be other abilities that offer a wider umbrella of protection. Donald's finishers are probably the main draw here, and unlike the last few links, both finishers here are totally serviceable. They're both practically the same and very reminiscent of Flare Force from KH2, but the leveled up version has some fireworks that have a chance at igniting enemies upon exploding. Beyond that, there's not much to say about the Donald Link. He can definitely be useful in clearing out mobs, especially if you're proficient in magic, but there's just other D-Links that I'd sooner equip for a grind session before picking the duck.
What's the big idea?
And where Donald goes, the big palooka follows. At number 9 is Goofy. Obtained at the exact same time you get Donald in both campaigns where they're available, it's just especially easy for these two guys to fall through the cracks as you speed toward the endgame. This might seem low because I know there were a few niche cases of using Goofy Spin to obliterate bosses, which I can appreciate, but again, limited utility considering how late this comes. But for example, you can go into the final episode's Terra Xehanort fight with nothing but some balloon letters, and you can bring this guy to his knees by just blocking and using Goofy Spin. Obviously, blocking here is good to avoid damage, but the Goofy Link special condition for filling the gauge is pulling off a successful block. Xehanort attacks pretty aggressively, so he's not that hard to block, and 2 blocks basically fill the gauge. Just make sure you don't get caught on these flower beds for some reason, and if Xehanort does manage to hit you, that damage is reduced, which we'll get to. This strat works for both phases of the fight, by the way. You can literally never swing your Keyblade and still win. It's kinda crazy. That niche potential for absolute destruction and the Goofy D-Link's abilities are the main reasons I have this above Donald. Specifically, Protect as his first ability is something I find to be generally more useful than Shell, since you're probably more likely to be hit by physical attacks as opposed to magic ones or things of a certain element. To refer back to our example, Xehanort's attacks can be reduced to chip damage territory while Goofy is active. The other ability is Stun Boost, which gives all your basic attacks a 75% chance of stunning an enemy, which, I mean, is fine. A handful of bosses can actually be affected by stun, but by the time you have this D-Link, that pool only includes Vanitas in the endgame. Otherwise, this is an effect limited to mob fights, and there's just way better stuff you can be doing to mobs than maybe stunning them. It's a shame Terra doesn't get this D-Link because Goofy's deck is 100% attack commands, and I can't even imagine the Armageddon a Goofy Spin Terra would call forth. And for the record, Goofy Spin is far and away the superior finisher on this link, and it's also the one you have from the start. Goofy Turbo is definitely flashier and maybe more evocative of the true Goof experience, but it's far too unwieldy to use reliably. You can sustain a continuous assault using Goofy Spin, but Turbo has you flying around with no rhyme or reason. What is this, Dream Drop Distance? The first thing you do when you get Goofy to level 2 is toggle your finisher back to level 1. Last note, I resent the fact that they gave Goofy Confusion Strikes. This lad is not confused nor confusing. He is the brain of the SDG operation.
And Goofy's clever!
I'm so sorry to do this, especially after going minutes, yes, minutes out of my way to fight for his equal rights, but I have to put Terra at number 8. And honestly, if you put him beneath Donald or Goofy, I wouldn't really argue with you. I make videos on the internet, I have to pick my arguments a lot more carefully than that. Like the last few before him, there's nothing inherently wrong with the Terra D-Link, but it's fairly middling and easily the least useful of the Wayfinders. One advantage Terra has over the last few links is that you get him as soon as you start the game, assuming you're not playing as Terra. Most of his commands are nothing special, but he does come with the Cure at level 2, and for some reason Zero Gravira, but the rest are all attacking commands. The most useful of which is definitely Sonic Blade, which he gets 2 of, and that's pretty damn good to have as early as the first world if you don't mind grinding the D-Link levels. It partners nicely with Terra's finisher, since if you get every hit with your Sonic Blades, you're pretty much set to use the finisher. And if you're using the level 2 finisher, by the time that runs out, at least one of your Sonic Blades will be recharged, so you can kinda just ping-pong between the two attacks until the link runs out or the fight is over. That level 2 finisher, by the way, is called Landbreaker, and it's fairly similar to Maleficent's level 1 finisher. Terra can't use his own finisher since he can't D-Link with himself, so I wonder if that's why the Maleficent one was made to be similar. The finisher itself is fine, just don't bother using it on Captain Hook, it doesn't go very well. If this one takes too long for your taste though, you can replace it with his basic finisher, which isn't as flashy or damaging, but doesn't overstay its welcome. Terra mainly made it this high thanks to the aforementioned Sonic Blade into Landbreaker strat and his level 2 auto block ability, which isn't perfect, but it does a decent job at negating attacks. His level 1 ability is Overdrive, which isn't very good, especially considering what'll be available to you later. It doubles your attack power when at 25% of your max HP or less. It can come in clutch, but bear in mind you'll be getting a full heal from using the Terra D-Link in the first place. After that, depending on how hard the enemies are hitting, it might not be an efficient use of your D-Juice to get whittled down to low health. And on harder difficulties, you probably won't have the luxury of choice when it comes to your HP sitting in your preferred range. This effect is sadly extremely outclassed by other links, and I think it should have been given a 2.5 or 3 times damage multiplier to maintain some utility throughout the game. At the number 7 spot, I initially had something else, but after going in and doing some additional testing, I ended up swapping 7 and 6. But I landed on putting Peter Pan in his place at number 7. The biggest argument against this lower placement is that Sword Bill can eviscerate certain bosses' HP, which is true. It's a speedrun technique, but it can definitely be employed casually to a lesser extent. Seen here, Vanitas being absolutely demolished during the Xehanort co-op fight. Granted, I'm using Chaos Ripper, but I'm on standard and actually a bit underleveled. But again, this is a pretty late D-Link, and those use cases aren't extremely frequent. At the very least, it's really funny to just mash X to stab your opponent over and over. It's not great for mob fights, since you're likely to kill whatever's right in front of you fairly quickly, and then be left floating there until the finisher ends. Sword Bill is definitely more of a boss fight finisher, whereas the level 2 finisher, Barrel Roll, is more suited for mobs, though it can certainly work for bosses too. Mercifully, if you've used Barrel Roll to clear out some enemies and there's nothing left, you can just purposefully fail the button prompt to end the finisher. It sounds kinda silly to give the link props for this, but not all links are so considerate of your time, which we'll get to. I should also note that Peter Pan's gauge is more quickly filled, fittingly, by doing air combos, which is a pretty easy requirement to satisfy to build up to those finishers. Also, level 2 turns Peter's portrait into Tinkerbell, which is the only time the character straight up changes from level 1 to 2 in a D-Link. I kinda get it, since they're pretty much a package deal like their KH2 summon, but I don't know, it's kinda weird how it's just one that does this. To reflect Tink joining in on the Link at level 2, a Kira command is also added to the mix. That mix consists of a bunch of fairly generic and quick attacking commands which are fitting but not super exciting or useful. There is also a Zero Gravira thrown in though, which is a nice touch since ignoring gravity is a big part of the Neverland experience. It's possible number 7 is even still too high for Pan because one of his abilities is a bigger nothing than Cindy's auto remedy, the culprit being a float. Peter, what are you doing? You can't say float, there's Kingdom Hearts fans watching! They pulled this effect from the White Knight card in Chain of Memories, and it already had very limited utility there. Basically none, except for a case I highlighted in the enemy card compendium where it might be useful on Marluxia 2. Even still, in that game, you got your jump height increased in addition to your falling speed decreased, but in BBS, all you get is the latter. And like, cute and all, but this does nothing. I'm sure if we monkeys on Type Raiders BBS for long enough, we could find a case where this does anything at all, but I'm hard-pressed to come up with a use case for the majority of the playing audience is casual or even completionist playthroughs. Given that Ven gets Glide and Aqua gets Double Flight in Neverland, I feel like putting any kind of air mobility gimmick on one of these D-Links is kind of redundant. But I can't blame them too much, I just learned myself how tricky it is to assign unique abilities for these things. I think if I were ranking the fake D-Links, they'd all probably be at the bottom, because I sucked at that. So half of the Peter abilities are a wash, but the other half consists of Double Strike, which is pretty good. This is partly what I was referring to when talking about how Terra's Overdrive ability is outclassed by other stuff. Double Strike also imitates a Calm card, this time being the Roxas card, which is one of the best in the game. It makes it so all your regular attacks hit twice and thus do double damage. This time, there's no HP stipulation, so you can pop the Peter Pan D-Link and immediately get to the buff with no setup or risk factors. Even still, I'd argue there are better, more efficient ways of clearing mobs or taking down bosses than making use of Double Strike here, but it's still a pretty powerful effect. That and 2 solid finishers make Pan one of the higher end links in this middle tier.
That's certainly not nothing.
Boy oh boy, the price of D-Linking is, thankfully, not that steep. At number 6 is Zack, and I'll cut to the chase, it's almost entirely because of the level 2 finisher, Hero's Pride. Holy Aerith casting holy, is that thing fucking nuts. You basically just fill up the gauge and then BBS puts on Advent Children while you go take a leak or grab a snack. I really don't think there's a contest for best finisher in the game after witnessing the might of this thing, it's truly disgusting. Maybe I'm just blinded by how flashy and badass it looks, but it has the damage output to match the theatrics. It's so over the top, the level 2 finisher basically just caps off with the level 1 finisher. It's 2 finishers for the price of 1. And the price of 2 finishers is also not steep. Well, it's a little steep. The Zack command gauge levels up slowly unless you're satisfying its special condition, which, by the way, and I might be missing this, but I can't find anywhere in-game that talks about these things. If it weren't for the wiki, I'd be screwed. I am forever indebted to that blessed website. Using basic attacks and commands helps to fill the gauge a little, but the real ticket to easy finishers is using counterattacks. If it ever felt like the Zack finishers were always especially shy about popping up, this is why. This thing works great for mobs and isn't too bad for bosses either. Once again, it was able to bring Vanitas to death's doorstep. Doesn't work quite as well on Master Xehanort. So far, I've failed to mention the commands in the Zack deck, and that's because they truly barely matter at all because you should just be focused on counterattacking and pulling off the finisher. The abilities are a decent bonus though. Berserk doubles the odds of dealing critical hits, and Attack Deflector grants a 50% chance of nullifying physical attacks. This is obviously better to have than not, but I found that it can actually mess with my attempts to pull off counterattacks. Sometimes I'm trying to guard an enemy attack, but it seems like Attack Deflector kicks in just a little bit early, and you're not able to counterattack off of the auto guard even though it looks exactly the same. I thought I had forgotten to equip my Counter Hammer command because it kept happening. So it's one minor pitfall, and unfortunately you can't just turn it off, but the worst thing about it is that you don't take damage and have to try and block again, so it's not too bad. The finisher alone propels this one to spot number 6, and I could see a case for it being higher. It's a good mob farming option depending on how good/patient you are with baiting out and blocking attacks to get that gauge filled. But there are unique benefits associated with the top 5 that I think justify their slightly higher placement.
Fair enough. And I'm still a work in progress after all.
Thank God Aqua's D-Link is pretty good because I had 3 women at the bottom of this list and I was starting to sweat. My patrons were sharpening their pitchforks, it was getting dire. Patreon.com/regularpat if you really like the video, by the way. If you only like it a little bit, please hit the like button because a little is enough. Those are the rules, that still counts. Admittedly, Aqua's placement here is mainly a testament to her Link's usefulness in the early game, especially during any kind of challenge run, but I wouldn't say it maintains no utility for the rest of the game. The main appeal to her Link is her second ability, Auto Life. It's basically Tinkerbell's Get Out of Death free card from KH1, or the Vexen card from Chain of Memories, or, you know, Auto Life from Final Fantasy games. Since you get the Aqua D-Link automatically upon starting the game as Ven or Terra, you can have this ability earlier than Wheelmaster or Mad Treant, which is pretty crazy. If you die while the Link is active, it revives you and gives you 25% of your max HP back. So it's certainly good, great even if you're on level 1, but it's definitely a nerf from something like KH1 Tinkerbell. Unlike Tink, who only gets dismissed if you die or dismiss her yourself, Aqua's D-Link will eventually run out, so you might end up dying right after the D-Juice depletes to 0 and then you're SOL. Also, it's entirely possible to get revived and then killed within your first revitalized breath, seen here. So, that's probably why they didn't mind giving this to you so early. Considering you also get a free heal when using the D-Link in the first place, an auto-revive ability might end up being more situational and tricky to activate than you might have initially thought. But look, it's the only ability in the game that reverses death, so I think that alone justifies top half. Outside of that, Aqua also gets Magic Deflector as her first ability, which is arguably less useful than the similar Zack or Terra abilities for negating physical damage, but it's still nice to have. If you're really bad at the Magic Mirror fight, you can just tank all of his projectiles. Again, considering how early this Link is accessible, even its commands offer some decent utility, especially in the way of magic and healing. As mentioned earlier, Kira is available as one of the Link's 3 starter commands, so between that, the D-Link activation healing you, and having Auto Life, Aqua is a great safeguard against early game dangers. She also comes loaded with almost entirely Tier 2 offensive magic, which is not impossible to come by in the early game, but it certainly takes less work to use this D-Link than scrounge up the commands yourself. If you're early game grinding, using Magnera into her basic finisher is great for clearing out mobs, and her second finisher isn't too bad either. Magic Volley is kinda similar to the maxed out Snow White finisher, except you only ever have to press X to shoot the orbs, so it's harder to mess up. And once again, if you need to end it early, just miss the prompt and the finisher ends. And the Aqua Link's special condition for filling up the gauge is using magic commands, which 7 out of 8 of her final deck consists of, so not difficult at all to build up her finishers.
That settles that.
We're getting pretty deep into the list, which also means we're getting deep into space. At number 4 is Stitch, also known by his birth name, Experiment 626. At this point, every D-Link left offers a unique and super helpful ability, and those abilities alone are enough, in my eyes, to make up the top 4. Prior to researching for this video, I would have actually had Stitch maybe one spot higher, but I found out his most valuable ability is actually a bit less special than I initially thought. Well, that ability is double CP, which doubles how quickly your commands level up in your normal deck while the Link is active. In a game where commands are basically your main tools, it cannot be overstated how valuable it is to have something that can speed up their growth. Now, if you've seen the minigame ranking, you know I've got no problem with playing some command board, which also levels up your commands, but even I can admit that's a slow process compared to slapping this Link on and grinding mobs for a bit. So if you're in a hurry or not particularly fond of board games, the Stitch Link is a godsend. Well, maybe more of a demi-godsend, considering there's another Link that also has double CP combined with another extremely useful ability. If you know, you know, and we'll cover it soon enough. That Link is accessed earlier for Ven and Aqua, but Terra doesn't get it at all, so Stitch is his only real option for a Link that helps level stuff up. That reality is what keeps Stitch afloat here, because he may just be saddled with the 2 worst finishers in the game. Alright, that's probably a bit too harsh, because one of them isn't bad, but good lord are they long and drawn out. I do think the level 1 finisher, Random Beam, is potentially the worst finisher in the game. It's basically the Dream Sparkle finisher from Cinderella again. You're locked into place and shoot forward with each button prompt. I don't know why they refuse to give you the freedom of moving your character left to right with these types of finishers, because once again, you're stiff as a statue and will only shoot directly in front of where you initiated the finisher. I'd wager this is even worse than Dream Sparkle, because sometimes your shit just doesn't connect. Theoretically, the beams can ricochet off of the walls and hit enemies that way, but I basically never see that happen. And it lasts 6 prompts and you cannot end it prematurely. So it's not that efficient, it has a lose condition, and you're locked into it for a far too long time, so say goodbye to any momentum you had going in your battle. And somehow, the second finisher is worse with this. It's a shame because Ohana Beat is the cutest finisher the game has to offer. You're essentially playing Ukulele Hero, and every successful input does AoE damage to nearby enemies and potentially stuns them. It's not the most vicious and efficient finisher, but it does a hell of a lot better killing things than Random Beam. But it lasts fucking forever. This goes on for 8 prompts, and these buttons take their time showing up. There is no way to leave this early. You are sitting through all 8 prompts. If you get one wrong, either accidentally or on purpose, tough shit, you're stunned and the finisher keeps going. I cannot even count the number of times I've finished everything off with Ohana B within the first few prompts, and then I'm stuck there just plucking the uke for fun while the battle has long been over. Like, obviously this isn't any real tangible detriment to your battles, but it's a time drain, and I'm sure you'd rather spend your time doing something else. For that reason, I always switch back to Random Beam as soon as I get to level 2, which sucks because that one also goes on too long and doesn't do nearly as well damage-wise, but it's at least slightly shorter. Like Zack, the Stitch Link also has the gauge bonus of performing counters, so I would advise that you actively avoid doing that. In fact, if you can, avoid pressing X to use the finisher at all and just try to kill whatever's left with your commands. There's no reason to be using this link outside of leveling commands, so just focus on killing things efficiently while it's active. Frankly, there's also no reason to be using this link if you're Ven or Aqua, but again, it's the only link that lets Terra double up on command experience, and he's 1/3 of the game, so it's what saves Stitch from a lower placement. Stitch also comes with Attack Boost, which doubles the damage of not just your regular attacks, but the Thunder Surges and Stun Edge that this deck comes with. The rest of the deck is made up of magic commands, including Akira included from level 0, so it's a nice consolation prize for having to deal with the feature-length presentations that are the finishers. The Stitch D-Link is also unique in that it's the only link with different commands depending on who's using it. Aqua gets a Thundaga Shot command in the level 2 deck, and since that's an Aqua exclusive move, the boys don't get it and don't even get a replacement, they just have fewer commands. So in the words of Fiona from the Shrek 2 video game,
Girl power rules!
that's for my Twitch audience. Disguised in shadows, the Rogue Racer reigns. At number 3, it's Captain Dark, or Justice. Well, it's both. It's Pete. Yeah, so the Pete D-Link's portrait is Captain Justice for levels 0 and 1, and it becomes Captain Dark at level 2, so I guess evil is canonically more powerful than good. This might seem kinda high for Pete, but it's at number 3 for one reason, and that's, as the large Traverse Town man once said, because money talks. You're probably not going to be hurting for cash too much on a casual playthrough of the game, but if you're trying to complete the reports and get the Platinum Trophy, you'll be doing a lot of melding, which in turn means you'll be buying a lot of commands. Your money reserves can dry up way quicker than you might expect, and that's where the Pete D-Link comes in, because both of his abilities are designed to help you accrue cash and items. The most useful ability of the two even comes at level 1, which is Money Plus, and that doubles the money dropped by enemies upon defeat. Partner this with the level 2 finisher, and you've found the key to generational wealth. At level 2, the Pete Link unlocks Vehicular Manslaughter, allowing you to do donuts on your enemies until they die and name you as the sole beneficiary in their wills. A lot of previous D-Link finishers have been cool or charming, but this one is probably the most fun because they give you a ton of time to rumble rave your opponents into the ground. My favorite spot for money grinding was always the Coliseum gates because you've got a couple of spawn waves, some bulky, wealthy enemies, and you're right next to a save point so you can easily back out into the world map to get your D-Juice back. Also, Pete's special gauge filling condition is picking up prizes, so when you're killing stuff and collecting extra money drops, this basically becomes a self-sustaining system. You can pull off a finisher, and then all the stuff that dropped as a result of your road rage is enough to get you right back into the driver's seat. The level 1 finisher is no slouch either, it's definitely outclassed by level 2, but it can still do some solid damage. I also love how both of the finishers reference a Disney Town minigame. I guess Ice Cream Beat sorta got the shaft, but Pete doesn't ever participate in that one, he just tries to break their shit. Pete's other ability is Steal, which gives you a chance of grabbing items from enemies when you hit them. So basically Treasure Raid or Grumpy, but the effect is applied to all of your attacks, not just one. I never use Pete to consciously do this, but it's a nice bonus when you're money grinding. By the way, there's a bit of confusion about how exactly to unlock Pete, since it's the only D-Link you can completely avoid on all 3 playthroughs, assuming you're just playing till the credits. To get Pete, you need to witness a Captain Dark or Justice event on a command board game played from the menu. I'm not completely sure if it works when playing from the Mirage Arena, so just to be safe, play from the menu. The Captain event is triggered via any character landing on a purple sparkle space, and it doesn't have to be you who does it, so play on a board that has 2 CPUs to up your odds. Of course, this game also needs to happen after you visited Disney Town because you wouldn't know who Pete is until then, and thus he can't show up until you meet him. By that same logic, you need to play on a board that isn't the Disney Town one because Pete's already a player there. Also, and this is important, you have to finish the game after getting the Captain Dark or Justice event. If you take a break or end the game, the D-Link won't unlock. I learned that the hard way just for you.
Playing dumb, eh?
So if you're only even vaguely familiar with Birth by Sleep, you probably knew going into this what the top two were going to be, and probably even the order they go in. It's impossible to deny the utility that these guys have, and the worst part of both of them is that they're not accessible for all three characters. But at number 2, it's the Future King, Mickey Mouse. Once again, the winning element here comes down to one of his abilities, this one being a double EXP. In my opinion, if your goal is to level up, there's really no reason to use anything but the Mickey D-Link when playing as Ven or Aqua. Like, if your Mickey is at level 2 and you're fighting anything that's not a boss or special unversed, you should probably be using Mickey. Remember how I said Stitch's double CP ability is outclassed by something else? It's this. Because while Mickey's ability is called double EXP, that refers to both raw leveling experience for your character and experience for your commands. It's 2 level up steroids for the price of 1, and given that Ven and Aqua get this link several worlds before Stitch, there's really no point in ever using him to grind up your commands. Again, Terra unfortunately doesn't get Mickey, so Stitch is his only real option for this, at least as far as D-Links go. Thankfully, there are still other ways to cheese EXP, like, for example, if you don't mind getting an EXP Walker ability from melding and then leaving your game on while Terra jumps on a trampoline, getting an experience point for each jump. He's sore as fuck afterwards, but the gains don't lie. Really though, I do think there was no need to make double EXP also work on commands, and I almost wonder if it was an oversight, because it really doesn't make any sense to have such an overlap over 2 abilities. But even if it didn't overlap, I'd still rather get experience for my characters than commands, so Mickey was always going to handily beat Stitch in this exercise. And even outside of using Mickey as an experience siphon, he comes equipped with some other fun stuff too. His first ability, Auto Teleport, has a 50% chance of just teleporting you out of the way of an enemy's attack. This can be especially funny when you're fighting someone who also makes heavy use of teleporting, like Vanitas. His deck also isn't half bad, consisting of Cura at all levels, Mind Shield, and Sign of Faith, which is a unique light-themed Aroga. But the best of all is his final deck containing a mini-command, because, you know, that's his girlfriend. It's also why I don't feel that stupid about giving Philip 2 Auroras, because the original devs had the same mindset. Both of Mickey's finishers aren't half bad either, and level 2 is pretty much a souped-up version of level 1. It goes on a bit long, and it's probably the easiest to screw up in terms of the button prompts, but it does decent damage and works well for both mobs and bosses. If you needed any more proof that I am on good terms with the mouse now, I hope this suffices.
If that's what you think.
So yeah, I mean, it's obviously Ven. The worst part about playing as Ven is that you can't link with Ven. My video runtimes might betray the feeling I'm about to express, but I have an overwhelming bias for going fast, and that is exactly what the Ven D-Link lets you do. If you level this link up to 1, not even 2, congratulations, the game's over. The Ven link at level 1 without any of the associated commands or finishers outclasses everything we talked about today. Level 1 grants haste, which doubles the speed of all your basic attacks. The speed of this link paired with Terra's strength is absolutely monstrous. And even though Aqua's strength stat isn't as high, it still works well with her too, because you truly just smother any resistance by hitting things so fast they can barely react. Like, Peter Pan has the audacity to say, "You won't stop me," before experiencing true, unbridled oppression at the hands of Terra, fueled by the Ven D-Link. He literally didn't get to do a single thing, I just bullied him until he threw in the towel. I obviously had to get footage for all these links in action for the video, and I can't even count how many times I'd get to a boss, use some other D-Links, and then either run out before the fight ended or eventually die. And then I go back in with the Ven D-Link and completely wipe the floor with them. They just can't breathe, they can't think, it's truly unfair. Ven's second ability is, I guess, a cherry on top of this stack of gold bars. Auto Counter has a 75% chance to automatically trigger a reprisal command upon getting hit if you have one equipped. I basically never notice this kicking in because I'm too busy turning my enemies into Swiss fucking cheese thanks to haste. Ven, of course, comes with his share of commands, and they also don't matter at all besides Cura, which is available in his final deck. His level 2 finisher, Air Dive, is another one that can feel a bit overly prolonged, but you can at least end it prematurely by hitting the wrong button. Since Ven's gauge fills up quicker just from using attacks or attacking commands, the finishers will trigger exceedingly often, and if you find this one too interruptive, you can always toggle it back to level 1. But I will say, you get a lot of safe airtime while using Air Dive, and it could buy you some time while your Cura reloads if you're in a pinch. His initial finisher is nothing to write home about, not that you would want to write to Master Ericus because he's a dick, but it's relatively quick and effective and doesn't break up a battle's pace too badly. I really can't recommend using this link enough, especially if you find BBS and Terra in particular to be too slow for your tastes. I'm not saying it fixes any issues the game might have, but it might make the experience a bit more bearable for you. This link works great on bosses, especially if you bring a balloon letter or two to refuel on juice. And it's also great for mobs. You'll be killing stuff so quickly and picking up their D-Link prizes, you can keep the pain train going long enough to clear out entire large areas. Of the 3 Wayfinders, I tend to give Ven the hardest time, but he's earned a huge W here today. Because I might call him boring, but I'm the furthest thing from bored as I tear through Unversed and make mincemeat out of bosses.
Thank you!
Alright, we did it. Again, I had a lot of fun digging back into BBS and really learning the ins and outs of these, and I didn't even cover every little thing they have to offer. This also obviously ended up being something of a double feature, so I hope you don't mind that I led you in here with the ranking promise and then made you wait until the second half. Once again, massive thanks to PJ for the assets. His stuff is all in the description if you want to follow. And I had a fun little idea. I want to see who in the comments can come up with the most creative D-Link for a character we didn't end up covering today. I want to see a full deck, their abilities, and even some finishers if you're feeling more creative than I was. Doesn't even have to be a character from BBS, do Genie or Riku or something. The best one, I will pin the comment. You can stand on top of the comment section and laugh at the peasants beneath you. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you want to see more stuff from me, and of course, patreon.com/regularpat if you're interested in supporting the channel and my future endeavors. That's all from me, remember to conserve your D-juice, and I'll see you next time.